I want to share with you today about with Jesus on the mountain. We're going to be looking over the next few weeks at the Sermon on the Mount. Mountain. It's just another word for mountain. A sermon on a mountain. It's recorded especially in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. But it's also there in Luke, just the Précis version, focusing on Jesus' pattern prayer. So Luke 11 also has it in there. So I really want to encourage you over the next few weeks. I really must do that, because otherwise we'll still be here when we need to go to the city celebration this afternoon. The Lord has just poured out the wisdom of and joy that this passage, I've really enjoyed preparing it. That's what I'm saying. So I want to encourage you to read it and reread it over the next few weeks. Read it all together. Sit down and read 5, 6, and 7 all in one go. Read it in different versions. Read little bits of it. Keep coming back and allow the Lord to take you down that rabbit hole, to get stuck on this bit, and allow Him to do the work, the surgery, the whatever it is that He needs to do in you, the building of putting in bricks. Allow the Lord to do it. So read it, reread it, incorporate it into your daily devotional time. Make it part of that time. Just allow the Lord to massage it into your life. Don't let it just be something that we're doing and you only ever think about it on Sunday as we're looking at bits of it. It's going to be impossible for us to cover all of it. And even this morning, I want to give an overview. But even in the overview, I'm going to have to leave stuff out. So I've put some slides together so I can go as quick as possible and hopefully not get sidetracked on the stuff that I shouldn't. My goal for today is 3 things. I want to show you how the whole teaching, all 3 chapters, how they fit together. It's not like spiritual or parable birdshot, where Jesus goes, well, I hope I covered everything. No, it's the exact opposite. He's super intentional. And in fact, Matthew really recognized this, and 5, 6, and 7 flow very clearly. But Matthew has also built the first 4 chapters of Matthew have built to this teaching, to the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm going to show you how that works as well. So these chapters are sometimes called Jesus's New Covenant Manifesto. And I want to make you aware of why that is, just as we go along. I can't dive into it, but I want to answer that. Why is it sometimes called Jesus' New Testament Manifesto? And I want to show you the progression of the themes, because there are themes and sub-themes, and they all just fit together magnificently, like that painting, the mosaicness of it. There's pieces of wholeness that Jesus has put together. Some of the parables in there are like 2 verses long. But there is a flow that those 2 verses fit into essentially. And I want to give you a sense of just that. But firstly, I want to show you the context. So the first, we're going to work backwards from chapter 5. So don't get confused. Point 1 is chapter 4, and point 2 is chapter 3. The first one is I want to show you in chapter 4. What's happened immediately before this? It's mostly about Jesus' baptism. That's how it starts off. Jesus is baptized by John in the Jordan. And from there, he goes on his first ministry trip, preaching in the area. And he calls his first disciples. So it's all these firsts. The baptism, by the way, of Jesus, if you've ever wondered about it, why did Jesus need to be baptized? He wasn't a sinner who needed to make a public statement of, I'm turning around for God. It was the exact opposite. And that's exactly right. It was the exact opposite. Jesus said, I'm prepared to submit myself to this baptism that you're all going through for the forgiveness of sins, even though I have no sins needing to be forgiven, so that I can be anointed as your representative when eventually I hang on the cross for you. So the baptism is more about the anointing. That's why the Holy Spirit comes upon him as he comes up out of the water. It's Jesus' obedience and association with us, the perfect Lamb of God, associating with us who desperately needed him. Before then, in Matthew 3, it's all about John the Baptist preparing the way for Jesus. Jesus hadn't started his ministry. That happens in the next chapter. But chapter 3 is about that. And chapter 1 and 2 of Matthew is all about Jesus' miraculous conception, his birth, and about all the challenges that his parents faced in terms of keeping him alive so that he could come to fulfill his destiny. The trip down to the Magi, the trip down to Egypt, the trip back and not coming back to where they had come from, and ending up in Nazareth. So there's been a progression. There's been a growth. Here was God incarnate as a baby. Here was John the Baptist coming as the Elijah to announce his Jesus' ministry. He's just about to start Jesus' baptism, but he's one man. He starts to do what God's called him to do, and he calls the first disciples. And to those first disciples, he preaches the Sermon on the Mount. I'm going to come back to that in a second. The whole point of this sermon, as it's called, is, and as I was preparing it, it reminded me of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's such a mouthful of a name. When he preached his famous message on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., I have a dream. The recording we have of that is amazing because you can see before he gives it, he's overwhelmed by the situation. Apparently, there were like 250,000 people there. That is a big crowd. 250,000 people. And they're there because he had called them to come and stand for this thing. But in the background of the recording, you can hear, I had to go and look up her name, Mahalia Jackson. She apparently was a well-known gospel singer at that time. And she's saying, tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream. And he latches onto that and he preaches this dream. I have a dream. And that's the famous sermon. This is Jesus's I have a dream famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. And in a sense, it's very similar to that. The difference is that Jesus didn't need any encouragement. He knew exactly what he wanted to say and who he wanted to say it to. And I'm still getting there. We're going to get to Matthew 5. But I want to also show you how this works, because I titled this With Jesus on the Mountain, because Matthew 5:1 says, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. So who was his audience? His biggest audience was his disciples, and they had come to him. And then at the end, it's actually Matthew 8 verse 1, it says, when he came down from the mountain, great crowds followed him. So there is this going up on the mountain, then 5, 6, and 7, and then 8, he comes down from the mountain. This thing really fits together. It's not like a whole different bunch of sayings of Jesus that Matthew organized. This is a coherent thing that fits together, and that Matthew has given us like these literary bookends. He went up the mountain, he came down the mountain. Everything that happens in between was on the mountain. And he was saying it first and foremost to his disciples who had come to him. If you want to know Jesus' wisdom, if you want to know his power and who he is, we have to go to him. But when we do go to him, we hear his voice. He teaches us, he puts our lives in perspective so that we can do his will. And the wonderful thing is that his will is the best for us. It's not accidental. Our submission to him is not us saying, okay, I suppose you need all the glory from my life. He's saying, no, you do my will. You will know my glory, yes, but it's going to be the best thing that you could never have conceived for your own life. So we go to Jesus, and he called, he didn't call his disciples, they came to him. I keep wanting to say he called his disciples to him. I think that's how it's phrased in Mark. And this, anyway, don't get sidetracked, Francis. I want to ask you one other question. Who else can you think of who went up a mountain and received instructions in the Old Testament? Right. Do you think it's an accident that Jesus did this? Knowing the Old Testament like he did, and like those who were hearing him did? I don't. I think he is, by his actions, making a very clear statement. And this is all still context. He's saying, I am like another Moses who went up the mountain to meet with God. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But it's not accidental. That's what I want to say right now. Jesus is saying, Moses went up the mountain to meet with God. When he went up, there at the bottom were 1 million people or whatever, but they had no identity. They had been slaves for 400 years. Before that, they were a family unit. 72 people or whatever it was. But now they're 1 million 400 years later. And they've been slaves for that whole... They know nothing about identity or anything. But when Moses comes down with the plan and purpose of God, what we call the law, the Torah, the teachings of God, suddenly they have identity. And that identity is encapsulated in this revelation of God that we call the Torah. And suddenly they're a nation. They have a national identity because they have this meeting with God together as this point of cohesion that gives them identity. So, as much as there's a meeting Jesus on the mountain, there is Moses and the mountain. But there are the similarities, but there are also some distinctives. The major passages that talk about Moses on the mountain, I've got them up on here, they talk about how awesome, literally awe-inspiring this experience was, not just for Moses, but for those who didn't go up. And Hebrews points out a couple of important points when it talks about what it was like. It says that when God came down, he came down in fire and cloud. And when he came down on the mountain was declared holy and off limits. So much so that even if an animal went up on the mountain, the animal was to be sacrificed. And it's only when God told Moses to go up that anybody could go on it. The exact opposite is true with Jesus. He invites everyone to come and hear for themselves, but they have to come to him. Moses said, no, wait, I'll be your representative. Well, actually, God told Moses to do it that way. So let's not blame Moses for all of this. That was God's way. But when he comes down, Moses comes down, he has the basis of a new identity for these people. when Jesus has delivered the Sermon on the Mount, he has given the people of God a new identity. The old symbol of covenant membership, of being part of the people of God, was circumcision. An external thing, physical sign on the body. At least when you felt bad, you could, if you were a guy, look down and be reminded of the fact that you had been dedicated to God. Forgive me, there is no polite way to talk about this. But that was the covenant, that was the sign of covenant membership. You were circumcised on the 8th day. You knew that you were in, but it was all external. And when Jesus comes and gives the Sermon on the Mount, he says the external's not enough. Covenant membership is now faith in God. Faith in God through Jesus Christ alone. And he wants to show us what that looks like and how it gives this sense of covenant identity, this sense of we are the people of God. We have the privilege of being a little bit diverse, at least. We as the people of God alive today have the privilege of being very diverse. And our cultures sometimes make it a little bit awkward because we are humans living in various places. But above that awkwardness, there is this reality that we belong together because by faith, we are the people of God. And Jesus wants, right at the beginning, to give this manifesto of, this is what I'm aiming at, guys. This is what I'm going to keep challenging you on, because this is what God is doing. So, enough talking about. What does Matthew 5, 6, and 7 say? See, I haven't tried to do too much. Only 3 chapters. I'm really going to race now, and I'm going to try and pull it all together at the end. If you want to follow along, please do. If you've got a Bible, you can. So it starts, chapter 5. We already saw how Jesus went up on the mountainside, and his disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. And the first thing, or the first group of teachings, are about perspective adjustments. The first one is what we call the Beatitudes. And what on earth does that mean? That is not modern English. You know, it's absolutely not. It's taken from the phrase, blessed are. That's what blessed are was in 16th century English. So that's how this section got its name. Blessed are those. Blessed are those who know God. The second section in here, which is verses 13 to 16. Did I put all this? Yes, I did. Salt and light. We are to be salt and light. It's about integrity of life, not just surface level, because salt looks like salt. Whether it's only when you taste it that you know, oh, yes, this is definitely salt. I still remember we were doing some cooking a while back. Actually, this story is about my dad. He was cooking tipsy tart for Christmas. That was our tradition. And he mistook the salt for the sugar. So you can imagine what that was like. And everything looked hunky-dory until then it was very clear that this is a very salty pudding. You only know salt is salt and not sugar when you taste it. And that's what he's talking about in that section, 13 to 16. Then immediately afterwards, Jesus talks about, I am the fulfillment of the law. Why does he suddenly jump jump to that because he's contrasting the Mosaic understanding of a relationship with God with what he is presenting now, with what God is wanting us to know about relationship with him. He's saying it hasn't gone. This is the same God. He still wants that stuff that you've been living by for a couple of thousand years by that stage. This was God. This absolutely is revelation. When you meet God in your Torah reading and offering your sacrifice, you are meeting the living God. But there's more than that. The Lord dropped this phrase in my heart many years ago, but it's really helped me to put what he's trying to teach in here into perspective. The phrase the Lord dropped in my heart is that the law is the periphery of the holiness of God. It's the outside. It's not the inside. It's not the heart of meeting with him. So when we read the Ten Commandments, we read truth and truth about God. But it's only the periphery. It's only the outside. He wants us to get deep, close, heart-to-heart conversation. Heart-to-heart life with him. If we get stuck at the periphery, we end up with exactly what Judaism ended up being. Legalism. He wants to draw us into his heart. But the important point that Jesus is making here is the law is not bad. It's not evil. Obviously, the book of Romans does a lot of that as well. But Jesus says it's more than that. I'm the fulfillment of all these things. If you know me, then you will be like this. One other thing comes out of this section that I am not ever, wow, dangerous thing to say. I'm not going to be able to talk about during this series, but is incredibly powerful to me. And that is, this gives us the basis of understanding how do we interpret the Old Testament as Christians. And Jesus in this passage gives us, and in fact in the whole of his teaching, gives us the manual. He gives us the way that we understand the law in the light of Jesus. I'm sorry I don't have time to talk about it now or at some other stage. But he moves on from there and he starts talking about, he's introduced, I'm the fulfillment of the law. He said you need perspective adjustment. Now he starts talking about the moral law, about how the law establishes how we should live. And he touches on a whole range of moral issues. The first one is anger and forgiveness, verses 5:21 to 26. Then he gets to the real heart of it, our sexuality. First of all, he deals with lust, verses 27 to 30. Divorce, 31 to 32. Then he talks about integrity and oaths. Why did I put the word integrity in there? Because Jesus' point is, let your yes be yes and your no, no. Don't feel like you need to swear an oath because you are the kind of person who does what they say. You don't have to prop it up by saying, as we stand in the Lord's presence, of course we stand in the Lord's presence. Live with integrity. Then he talks about personal rights. I think these two are fantastic. The first one he talks about is retaliation. But I have the personal right, when I've been affronted, to retaliate. Not under the new covenant. Why? Because God doesn't care? No. Because we must leave space for the Lord's just judgment. And retaliation is never just. We must leave space for God's righteous justice to be done. And the second one is in how we treat enemies. It's my right to hate you. You have offended me. I have that right. No, you don't. Jesus needs to be Lord of my personal rights. Then he goes on to talk about what I've called personal practices. The first one is generosity. That's 6:1-4. Then he talks about prayer, the well-known passage, which we read in Connect Group this week, 6:5-15. And thirdly, he talks about fasting, Matthew 6:16-18. And the point of all three of those is these things are good, but if it's all about looking good, the external, then you have your reward. Your reward is how people think about you. But that's not God's intention with any of those things. So personal practices. Then he moves on to talk about values. Where your treasure is, there your heart is also. Do not store up for yourself on this earth, Matthew 6:19-24, but rather make sure you keep a heavenly perspective. Where are your values rooted? If they're rooted on this earth, then they are going to change. And the value that you derive from them is also going to be here. But as believers, we are eternal beings. Our value system and our values have to be rooted with Christ in God in heaven. The second area, because man, he makes it tough. He talks about worry and anxiety. Where's your treasure? Oh, yes, Lord, give me some more treasure. Well, let's talk about worry and anxiety. Because I am your provider. Matthew 6:25-34. He is our provider. Do you remember how he teaches us to pray about asking him for provision? Give us today our daily bread. I don't know about you, but I often feel like I've prayed, Lord, give us today next year's daily bread. Because I want to have security. And he says, I am your security. Treasure, worry and anxiety. Then he moves on to judgment. This is that famous passage about don't judge and you won't be judged. For with the measure you judge, it'll be measured to you. The inference is you're not actually a very good discerner of the values that warrant judgment. Rather, trust the Lord, who is the judge of the whole earth and knows how to do what is really right. Then, divine provision. Ask, seek, and knock. Matthew 7:7-11. That's a really exciting passage because that answers the question about, well, what should I do, Lord? Should I just sit back and wait for you to send me divine Mr. Delivery? And he tells us very clearly, no, ask, seek, and knock. And then the last in this section of values is the so-called golden rule. Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. It's a really good practical way to start. What do I need right now? Okay, that's the attitude and what I need to be doing for others. And he's coming to a conclusion here. He's winding up towards this, and he talks about, I wrote down integration. I meant to write down integrity and consistency, auto-correction. And you know what? I read it and I reread it and I still read integrity and it doesn't say it. Never did. Matthew 7:15-20, he talks about fruit. By their fruit you will know them. By my fruit he will know me. You will know me. Not by my Sunday morning preach, which is truly awesome. By how I live when you see me after I've just had a car accident sometime during the week. By their fruit you will know them. And then there's this section on what I've called lordship, which is 7:21-23, where two different groups come and say, Lord, Lord. To one he says, I never knew you. Whew. By their fruit you will know them. not by what we say, but whether what we say is what we do. And the two line up. And Jesus, summarizes all of this together with a parable. The parable that if you went to Sunday school, you know really well. Build your house on the rock. Build your house on the rock. That is Jesus' climax of the Sermon on the Mount, is to sing them a Sunday school song. Because that summarizes everything that he's been saying. He's been challenging them from the beginning to the end about, you're religious, good. You don't go far enough. You don't go deep enough. You don't go close enough to me. You think you're okay because you had the snip when you were 8 days old? Your heart, your faith, that is the sign of your covenant membership. And this is how it looks. Where are your values? How's your integration? How's your integrity? Are they integrated? Maybe integration was in there somewhere. And you know what the people's response to this sermon is? They look at Jesus, Matthew 7, 28 and 29, and they say, where have you been all my life? No man taught as this one, because he teaches as one who has authority. But he's not even a rabbi, he's a carpenter. But he has authority. God will offend our sensibilities in terms of these things. That I do have some more to say about, but not today. So what is the manifesto in short? Change is happening. That wonderful scripture in, I think it's Isaiah 55. Behold, I'm doing a new thing. This is what he was talking about. And Jesus is saying, it's happening. It's not going, it is happening. And it's happening into our attitudes, our moral values, our values, how we live, our whole value system, and how we know that we are his. There is evidence of change. And if there isn't, then there isn't covenant integration. There isn't covenant ownership. It's our fruit that proves that we're in. So I hope that I've answered. I think I have. I've shown you how the whole teaching fits together. I could possibly have done a slightly better job, but who knows? There is a continuity. There are these little subgroups. So above if you have a Bible that has headings, some of those headings can be grouped together. And there is this logical progression. You've heard it said, but I say to you. Those 3 sections at the end of chapter 5. You've heard it said, the law says this, but actually this was God's intent. Right, let's go deeper. This means there needs to be fruit, and it challenges and changes us. This is Jesus' New Testament manifesto. Can you hear how it is a manifesto? It's Jesus telling us what he's going to be telling us for the rest of his public ministry. It's not contradictory. It's not, I had this great idea. Let me share it with you. Okay, now let's go and do life together. No, there is this continuity. And Jesus knew it, and he knew what it was. He knew what God wanted to establish. He knew what God wanted to communicate to us, what we needed. And he does it in this incredible context that looks like what God did through Moses. And hopefully you can see that there is this progression that moves towards that wonderful parable about where we build. Not what we build it on. The unseen. We can look good on the outside, but is Jesus not the foundation? That's what it says elsewhere. But is he the rock that we build what we build on? So I'd like to challenge you with this. Do you need the Lord to reorientate you? And can I just, in a moment of vulnerability, say, if you can't say yes to that, I'm not sure that you are engaging with Him adequately. Because I need Jesus to help me reorientate my attitudes still. This is not a done deal. It's the fact that He is at work in us, that we are prepared to commit to being reoriented. That is part of the proof that we are in the new covenant. It's part of the fruit. Look, there needs to be fruit to the fruit. There needs to be proof that this fruit is real in our lives. But are you hearing the Lord's speaking specific things to you about you need to reorientate yourself with regard to this, in this area of your life, in your values, as well as your practices? So that which motivates what we do and what we actually do. If you're a believer, then this will most likely manifest as a nudge in the right direction or a tweak, rather than if you are not a believer, it's that 180 degree, you're going the wrong direction, you need to orientate and focus yourself on me. Whichever it is, we need to be doing it.